In this new economy, your resume doesn't open the door. Your relationship with AI does. It's not about where you went to school. It's not about how many years of experience you have. And it's definitely not about mastering the status quo. Today, the most valuable thing you bring to the table is how you think alongside machines.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Sabba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools.
Last week, Fortune magazine published a piece called Companies Are Overhauling Their Hiring Process to Screen Candidates for AI Skills and Attitudes. While most people are still brushing up their resumes, and most schools and college and career centers are still helping students put together that traditional one-pager resume, the companies they want to work for have already moved on. They're no longer asking things like, where have you worked? Instead, they're asking, can you think alongside AI? Can you adapt with AI? And will you grow with AI? And they don't just want your answers to these questions, they want evidence. We're talking about a future where the most valued candidates won't just have experience, they'll have fluency and examples in the tools they're using, the workflows they've created, and most importantly, the mindset they are cultivating. Now, if you remember a couple years ago, or my gosh, it seems like a couple years ago, but it was really just last year, in Microsoft's Work Trend Index for 2024, they shared how 66% of hiring leaders say they don't even want to hire someone without AI skills, and 72% said they would pick a less experienced candidate with AI skills over somebody with more work experience. And at that time, we often, and even till this day, we often highlight how what workplaces consider AI skills, schools often consider cheating. Now, these AI skills that, still in many school areas that people are calling cheating are now just baseline expectations for skills we expect people to have entering the workforce. And these are not just for technical roles. We're seeing this across every industry, from sales to operation to education to finance, and of course, even the creative roles as well. If your work touches communication, analysis, collaboration, or decision making, you are going to have to learn how to work alongside AI.
I worry that people don't realize how great of a challenge this is for students. And we still have some colleges that aren't taking this seriously. They don't realize how big of a problem it is. I saw someone post on LinkedIn this morning who works at a university, helping the university kind of adapt AI and help the students prepare. And she had a post about the very core of our discussion centered on a scenario. You like scenarios. I presented. What happens when students driven by ethical concerns? What happens when students driven by ethical concerns, perhaps environmental sustainability or philosophical objections, refuse to engage AI tools? Must we develop a different assessment pathway to accommodate the non-AI users and the AI users? And when I saw that, I was thinking, oh my gosh, that's so disconnected from reality. Not that you should really force somebody to use AI, but to this whole attitude of with students, it's okay to say you can learn with AI or without it, because the students really need to learn how to work with AI, right? Part of what you do in school is you learn how to do work. You learn how to work with other people. And that's part of the skill set that you take into the workforce. If you have a bunch of people who are not learning to work with AI or think they can learn without it, they're going to be shocked when they go to a job interview and they're saying, what have you done? Can you work with AI? Can you adapt with AI? Will you grow with AI? And you're going to be like, I think AI is unethical and I never used it. And my professor gave me a different kind of assignment. I think, and the interview is going to end. There aren't going to be companies looking for people who refuse to use AI, maybe a trash collector or something, but you don't need a degree for that. To me, degrees are still, for better or worse, mostly focused on knowledge work. And all or nearly all knowledge workers are going to have to work with AI in order to succeed. And I think the educational system as a whole needs to take that very seriously. I happened to be watching a podcast that just dropped, The Diary of the CEO, and he interviewed Jeff Hinton, who's called the grandfather of AI. He's really one who pushed the development of this neural network approach and then this deep learning approach that we're seeing make AI work essentially. And Hinton was talking about how the educational system is a bit out of touch. And obviously, we've worked with people who are doing a lot, and there are some schools that are starting to try, but there really aren't a lot that are rising to the moment. And the example he gave was of our current educational secretary, Linda Mahmohan, at that GSV conference that we were both at, right? When she was asked about AI, she kept calling it A1, right? A1, and then all these jokes came around about the steak sauce. And
He's
they
never going to escape
played a
that.
clip, they played a clip of her talking about one. And they're like, oh, these are the people in charge. And then they just start laughing, right? They're like, and I don't think it's that hopeless because obviously we've seen work being done by schools and all these types of things. But I think a lot more needs to be done to give people a better chance, a better opportunity. And I was talking to someone else this morning who had started a nonprofit to do some of these things. And we were both saying, okay, people keep issuing all these reports. There's all these reports, and we're both on LinkedIn. So we see all these reports come out, and it's like another report. And there's another person going to visit somebody in Congress or this or that. But what's happening? What are people doing? We need to start doing things to help students get prepared for whether it's a workforce or entrepreneurship. We want to give them, you never know what exactly you're going to do, but maybe what jobs will exist in the future. But we're starting to see an idea as to what skills are going to be required for whatever does exist. And we always want to give our students the best opportunity. And right now, we're probably not giving them the best opportunity in many cases by saying you don't need to use AI or I'm opposed to you using AI. You're undermining their education. They might be better off if they weren't even there.
And I think that is one of the interesting things about LinkedIn. I think a lot of people are starting to think about this now, and we've always known it. So Ohio State University, we're teaching AI in everything, AI fluency in every course, whatever subject area is, we are looking at how AI complements whatever this area is. And there's this lady, and apparently she's pretty famous. Her name was Emily Bender.
Yeah.
And I saw her post, and she seemed intellectual, she seemed like a decent human being. And maybe she is. Maybe that was the wrong thing to say. But anyways, the point is that she posted this really aggressive opinion, exactly what you just said, echoing basically what you just said, that this is a disgrace to our university. This is the end of this and this. You're all just Sam Altman's supporters, basically trying to move this initiative forward. And I do think that is one big flaw. A lot of people really take an individual and categorize it alongside an emerging technology. It's like saying when laptop came out, stop being an advocate for Compaq or Microsoft because these laptops are There's a very strong correlation for people. But anyways, I went into her, I commented genuinely curious. I was like, what's your alternative? If you're a professor or you're seeing this and you don't like this vision that this group has, what's your alternative? And she had the snarkiest comments back to people. I commented early and she didn't really do it to me. And she started to, but I was like, I just made a joke and I was like, I wish there were emojis or a voice recording for comments so you could hear my tone. I was like, I'm genuinely asking you because I too do believe that putting all AI in kids' hands, honestly, from my experience, what I see, they just don't have the skills and habits to be able to be given these tools without some really effective guidance, and not just even guidance on how to use it, but somebody who actually knows how to change the assignments they're doing so that they can actually benefit. Not, oh, AI wrote it, you wrote it, who did it better? That is not what we mean when we say AI skills. And she basically didn't, her thing was just get rid of it all. We can fight back against the tech companies. And then she started, basically anybody in the comments who was commenting to her, she would make fun of them based on their headline if they had technology in their title. So I commented back and I was like, okay, you know what? I actually thought I came here for a sophisticated conversation. This is not what I was thinking. And so some other person started citing all her credentials. He's like, you want a sophisticated conversation? Did you know she's published, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you know what? Honestly, it doesn't really matter, because if you don't know how to have a civil dialogue about differences of opinions, and I feel we've been talking about this a lot lately, but even just in society in general, I think we need the reminder that democracy is made up of healthy debate and dialogue. And if you have a different point of view, that's totally fine. But you should know how to articulate it. And more importantly, I guess this would go back to debate. You should know how to articulate with somebody who might have a different opinion than yours. Otherwise, you're both just at a standstill, running in parallel lines, and never really creating that community and continuity. But going back to that Fortune magazine, since you talked about interviews, One of the other things that they wrote about in the article was how the interview is now a sandbox. Instead of just doing a traditional test, and maybe some of those things still exist, but basically a big way in which companies are moving is they are asking candidates to use the tools live to do an
Right.
experiment or a test. So apply ChatGPT to a sales campaign, co-create with an AI tool like Claude or ChatGPT in real time. And there was a CEO in the article, Alejandro Castellano, and he said, we care as much about how they solve a problem as we do the end result. So this concept of your attitude towards working with something, there was a really big theme in the article around mindset, so that like your attitude towards how you use them, how you adapt, how you grow is something they really were looking for. There was another CTO that they talked to from Charge Lab who said skill sets can be taught, but mindset is harder to coach and more important long term. Curiosity, coachability, willingness to play and experiment. These are the new soft skills. And of course, I'm going to add it in here. That is design thinking. You cannot learn mindset overnight or in a 30-minute lesson or a 60-minute PD or a one-day workshop. Mindset is a continuous thing that you are working on. It is always getting stronger, so that when you do have a technology, say like AI, where things are aggressively now moving forward, you have the muscle. You have the muscle that is so strong to help you navigate this. And basically, the main theme of the article was, even if you're new to AI, if you are somebody who is either training other people like we do in schools, or you're somebody who's graduating or somebody who's looking for a position, some of the things that they are looking for is, are you open to learning? So do you know how to learn? Do you notice where AI can add value and where it might not? And are you building workflows that support that use of it? And so basically, one big kind of takeaway from that is they're not just hiring for the past anymore. They are hiring for people who know how to hire for how. And that's, again, I think one of the most important parts of the learning process that gets people excited, that you really need your teachers and coaches and mentors for, but probably the one that perhaps isn't as focused as much yet.
Yeah, I mean, the technology, right? It's changing so fast. It's changing in predictable ways. But you say, okay, even something it wasn't great for is now it's really good at, right? So a year ago, when Sora video came out, it was cool. The images were great, but obviously didn't really understand physics. You see somebody's arm go through somebody's chest or something like that. And now it really does seem to have a pretty strong understanding of physics. There's a story going around in the NBA finals. There was a commercial that was entirely made by AI. One person spent 2 days doing it and listed 3 or 4 tools they used. But it talked about how in the past, a similar commercial would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make. And I'm sure this person was pretty well paid, but I doubt they were paid even $100,000 to make this same commercial. So that's really transformative. It's really with writing. I think it's incredible. I always ask it to rephrase things, or I want a more academic prose, or I want something to draw in the reader for a blog post. It's really helpful there. It's obviously very helpful with image design. You can use it to create apps now, which a lot of people are starting to figure out, that can help you with your daily workflow. You can create your own app. That wasn't possible a year ago. Is it still the best thing for facts? Absolutely not, right? So you have to know, you go back to what you're talking about, what to use it for, what not to use it for, and then how to build a workflow. People give a lot of examples like, okay, because it makes mistakes, you can still have it draft documents that maybe junior associates in a law firm would draft, but just as you would check the work of a junior associate, you would also check, right, that. It's being used in a lot of ways that are really useful. That doesn't mean it's not useful or maybe even bad to use in some other way. And I see a lot of kind of the debates around AI, they coalesce, and I get this too, oh, you're just like really pro AI. I'm like, I don't know if I'm really pro AI. I think AI is here. I don't know if it's going to be net good or bad, but I think there's a better chance it's going to be net good, or at least not bad for you if you learn how to use it. That's my own position. But then so people are against it. They just give some crazy thing it did. Like yesterday, I think there was a Tesla driverless experiment where they had to go by a bus and it ran into these fake kids. So they're, oh, AI is bad, right? AI cars are bad, even though they're generally safer. At least the ones we've had so far. I don't know about the Teslas, right? Waymos have lower accident rates than human drivers. So people coalesce into these things. And to the Ohio State thing, I agree. People need more training and they need more integration. You know, one reaction I had to that, I saw somebody say, well, is everybody trained? What are procedures? What are the policies? AI is an arrival technology. That's kind of what somebody from MIT said, and it's here. And it changes quickly and has a lot of different applications and uses and a lot of different fields of study. And generally universities they have a lot of different applications and fields of study. And it's not going to get implemented through central planning. We have a 3-year plan to pull AI into our university. Oh, okay. I mean, that's not going to last. So I think to your point, it's, yeah, people need guidance. They need support. They need people to talk to them about what these technologies can and can't do. But I think they're also saying, okay, we got to use it. And when I was out at the GSV conference, they were talking about, they had somebody OpenAI because they partnered like with the California state system, right? And they were talking about that. And somebody from another university was talking, Northeastern or Boston University, that they partnered with Claude to help them keep up to speed. So these technologies are here, they're coming quickly, they're coming into the workforce, and we all need to do our best. And I think that people who don't do their best and put their best foot forward, they're going to get left behind. Basically, we have another society that's emerging. And, you can decide you don't want to be part of that society, but it's obviously going to be economically, at a minimum, pretty difficult for you.
Absolutely. And before we go on, I do want to give a little shout out to some of the people who are doing, honestly, some amazing things, because I don't think it's so much that people aren't doing things. I think it's just the way media works. And I think just what you're connected to. I think a lot of the people who are doing things, especially in the education spaces that I see, are not people who are also really big on social media. And I think this is maybe something that is a bit of a white space and a gap that organizations might have to look at. How do we highlight people in different ways so that kind of media and those stories are being shared across different mediums? Whereas what I've started to notice, I actually shared this last week online, how 90% of my business is still word of mouth, in person, and things along that. And for somebody who creates the amount of content that I do, it has been a fascinating insight. Now, that content is still super valuable. Those people watch it, those people like it. If somebody doesn't know me, then when they go there, they can see all these different things. But what I've realized a lot about education spaces is they very much operate in person. And so, for example, just last week alone, the state of Nevada, whose AI guidance we talked about a couple episodes ago, it's an absolutely beautiful guidance. The state of Nevada came together with a National Council for the Economy, NCE, National Council
Right.
for Economy and Education, amazing group. And they came together basically to bring all of the Nevada districts together for a leadership retreat where they didn't just look at AI, but the past, and they've been doing this for a few years. But last year, they did a big one on the new state learner profile. And then we did something with AI. Okay, what were the things you were doing last year? Now, what can you do this year now with AI to accelerate that work? But if I wanted to go and find that story online, honestly, I don't know where I would go. And so there are, I think, a lot of things happening that are under the radar. And they were just a phenomenal group. They were eager, they were enthusiastic, they were doing all of the activities, they were strategizing. It was absolutely phenomenal. And then from there, I actually went to Georgia, Albany, Georgia, which I had never been to before, quite frankly, hadn't heard of before either. And the superintendent, Kenneth Dyer, just for the last 2 years, he has been doing, I will tell you one thing that I've noticed across the board for people who are doing well. There are people who invested in culture pre-ChatGPT. And now they have a really strong foundation to be able to run with. And the work that they were doing there, he said, we've been doing this for the last 2 years. Now we're ready to level up. We want AI as a teammate. We're taking things to that next level. So I got to go spend some time there and look at what they were doing. And then I went to Michigan. And in Michigan, they have a whole group where people basically work with different districts on continuous improvement. And so we looked at how does AI support you there. But again, if I wanted to see any of these stories online, unless you're coming to my Instagram page or you're coming to my stories, I don't know where I would see these stories. And I think that maybe is something that we should all, perhaps if you're listening to the podcast or you're an organization or somebody, maybe that's something we need to get better about, is countering this narrative that people aren't doing things, because I actually think a lot of people are doing things. What I will tell you last week, just with all the things that were happening with just politically and whatnot across the board, one of the things that I could not let go of last week was how hard people are working in their communities. Like, it actually really was just both like hard to see, but also so inspiring to see how many people, they don't get good policy from the government. Our government is so distracted with so many other things. They don't get the support that they need as leaders, and they are literally figuring it out on their own together with people. And so I think we need to find a better way to really highlight and amplify these stories.
Actually think that this could be good, right? I think there's probably like a little bit of a delay or a gap because district leaders are used to things coming from their state education agencies, and people are used to things coming from the federal government. And then their normal process is to take that and over a period of time, organize some committees and some planning processes and implement this defined thing. Right. And now there's kind of two exigencies. AI, you need to bring everybody's ideas to the table. Like everyone, it's not just the IT people or instructional technology people. It's literally everyone involved in the school and involved in the community. And there's no we'll do it this way and everything, this is the way to do it. everybody's learning. So in some ways, that absence of leadership or direction is actually empowering people to take charge, right, of their own initiatives and try some things out. And I'm sure some districts and schools will say, yeah, we don't really think that's a good idea. We're going to do this. And other people are going to do that. But that's really what you need, right? Like at this stage, you need some experimentation. And look, even the experimentation, you're not really going to know the end result. For conventional approaches to education, you can do what are called longitudinal studies where you say, okay, and like 10 or 15 years, we learned this thing and these people, they were successful in this way or whatever. In 10 or 15 years, the world's going to be a lot different. Maybe even the best things we're doing now are not going to be useful in 15 years. We have no idea. So we've got to take some educated guess and do the best we can based on the knowledge we have. That's a thing. Like universities and K-12 educational institutions are generally filled with very well-educated people who have spent a lot of time working with students, who have a lot of content knowledge of various things, even if they don't know a lot about AI, have thought about technology. And AI is not the same as other technologies. So I think that gets a little overplayed, who have a lot of ideas if you talk to them. You've got to take some of those and implement it. And I think some way this lack of government leadership can be really empowering to people. Now, some people are using it as an excuse not to do anything, but yeah, you're right. Other people are doing a lot. I saw this stuff posted online about Michigan virtual and stuff that people have been doing there. I saw the Nevada thing. We have some stuff happening in Ohio. I think the Georgia thing that you're talking about, I saw a news story on like about 2 years ago that said, oh, they were ready. They were more ready for ChatGPT because they had already started thinking about AI. So it's like, Mustafa Suleiman says, the world is yours. This is your chance. If you're a school leader and you go do something with AI, nobody can really criticize you for being right or wrong, right? They can only criticize you for not trying because everything's up in the air. Society's changing a lot. It's going to change even more. It's changing politically, but that just compounds the change, right? But also that is in the same direction. You have a devolution of government support in a lot of areas, not just in, how to deal with AI. And people are going to need to take more responsibility for themselves. They're going to have to. They're not going to be able to depend on the government the way you used to, even when you needed it. It's time to step up. But I don't think people realize how much creative capacity exists within them.
Yeah. And I think big piece of that goes back to that human agency. Do you believe that you have the agency to do these things? And that brings us to our next topic. There is an incredible new study out of Stanford's future, and it's called The Future of Work with AI Agents, Auditing Automation and Augmentation Potential Across the US Workforce. And it is a super clear snapshot of where the future of work is going with AI agents and what it could look like, but more importantly, what people actually want that future to feel like. So this was not just some thought experiment or a hypothetical study. This was actually a large scale audit. And the Stanford team included Eric Brynjolfsson, who informs and influences a lot of the work that we do. I might say these names wrong, Yijia Shou and Humishka Zope. And basically what they did was they built a database called Workbank. And they drew on insights from 1,500 domain workers, 52 AI experts covering 844 tasks across 104 occupations. This is the first time we're seeing such a comprehensive look at both worker preferences with AI and also AI capabilities. I think a lot of times we lean more towards the AI capabilities. But one of the really interesting things about this study, they didn't just ask, can AI do this? They asked, should AI do this? Do workers want AI to do this? And if AI is involved, how much should it lead versus support? And I thought this is just such an example of, I think about how, for example, Eric Brynjolfsson, right? This is somebody who's been talking about augmenting people with AI since I can't even remember, but we can easily say 20 years, easily, if not more. Imagine saying the same thing for 20 years and still not having people really get it or really move in that direction. It's just so admirable. And so I think it was also just a reminder as I was reading this, how committed you have to be to your beliefs and your vision and your values. And it's something that he talks about a lot. And one of the things he has really advocated for is creating AI in a way that does augment people, not replace them. And so to see a paper like this come out is really a great validation of how we can move in that direction. So anyways, to answer those questions, they basically introduced a 5-level spectrum called the human agency scale. So H1, so it was like H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H1 was full AI autonomy, and H5 was the human is absolutely essential, the AI is just supporting, okay? And what the main finding was that the most desired level of AI involvement was H3, which basically is equal partnership between workers and AI for repetitive, low value tasks. And what I love about like scales and spectrums is like right now, maybe more people are H3. But who knows tomorrow if really that vision of being able to do the more human things, friends, family, relationships, we do create a world where that is something people can spend more time doing. Maybe you do get comfortable going more towards like H2 and things like that. Or if it's the opposite and we see a huge economic backlash, maybe people do start going more to like H5 kind of a space. So I thought the scale was a really great idea, but basically they just said that a lot of people are actually open to AI automation compared to what most people think. They said for 46.1% of tasks, workers expressed a positive attitude toward AI agent automation. And the primary motivation, freeing up time for high value work, which again, if you go back and you look at the research, whether it's Daniel Pink's Drive, Seth Godin, The Song of Significance, we know that as people, we are driven by meaning and purpose. And so a really big part of it, as it is with most of his work, was not about AI replacing people, but playing a supportive role to be able to offload the tedious and burdensome tasks. Things like scheduling appointments for tax preparers, maintaining files for public safety. There were just a lot of tedious types of things that were in there. The other thing, though, the paper revealed, there was not a blanket desire for automation. People don't want to see the world automated away. There was less inclination to automate tasks where people enjoyed things or they felt vulnerable that jobs would go away. So, for example, in the arts, design, and media, only 17.1% of tasks received positive desire ratings for automation. So basically, people don't want to be replaced by machines, and they also don't want to be rescued. What the paper really showed is that they want AI as a teammate, as an equal, as a member of their team that's going to help them do their best work. It's going to also do the boring stuff so they could focus on the more interesting things and things like that. And what was also interesting was they took that data and then plotted it against a chart that had 4 zones. So the first zone was a green light zone. This was high desire and high capability, ready to go. We can deploy it. People are ready for this. They want this. Then there was the red light zone, high capability. Okay, so this is very possible, but low desire. So there was a lot of pushback against using AI here, even though it had the capability to be used. The third zone was an R&D opportunity zone. There was a high desire for AI to do this thing, but low capability in the moment for AI to perform. And they said that is where innovation should be focused because that is what people are looking for when it comes to these tools. And then the last one was a low priority zone. It's not desired and people don't want it either. So like win-win on both sides. But what was so interesting, okay, their research said 41% of Y Combinator backed AI startups. So the people investing AI startups are building in either the red light zone or the low priority zone. So basically, you are building AI and you are investing in companies where the capability is low and people don't want it to be there either. Or the one, for example, like the red light zone, there's a high capability, but look, people don't want it over here. And I think this was just a really, like, we talk a lot about signals, the importance of building with people, not to people or for people, because that is where you are probably going to get a lot more pushback. Whereas if we look at things that aren't in their R&D opportunity zone, right? Like high desire, but hey, the capability is not there. Let's work on making those things better. We potentially can have a much brighter future where people have agency, where people have a role to play, but people are also excited about where it's going to be integrated.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, to tie it back a little bit to the educational system, you need to prepare people for these higher value roles where they're innovating and contributing. Because even if AI comes in that push into that space, that's where you get your entrepreneurship, right? That's where somebody who has a job's like, why? Sometimes people work in these companies are like, I want to go start my own company. I want to do my own thing. I want to make my own product, and they'll be able to take advantage of those opportunities. Like people say, oh, the educational system, it's designed to. One of it's become less, right? But the idea of this factory model, this compliance, you sit there and you do these automated tasks. And even when I grew up, a lot of people still worked in assembly lines and stuff like that. Automation of basic repetitive tasks is happening, right? And it is going to happen. We see Waymos replacing Uber drivers and taxi drivers. Like that is a reality. It's going to replace call centers where basically, yeah, you give people an answer within a constrained set of don't, right? So automation is going to happen. It is happening. Even some low-level coding, right, that's getting automated. So how does the educational system really help prepare people to become innovators, right? To think outside the box. Because to me, even if AI becomes creative and thinks outside the box, and we can debate that a little bit, but you just spot that it does that. You still need creative humans. I don't say Sabba's creative, so I don't have to be creative, right? So even if AI is creative, that's what's going to work. And it's going to come down to the interpersonal skills. One thing I picked up when reading it was a line that said AI agent integration may reshape the core human competencies, shifting from information-focused skills, right? That's something AI can do, to interpersonal ones, right? And I always think that, I think back to a podcast I was listening to with another AI researcher, and he's talking about, how much smarter humans are than squirrels. But he said, look, squirrels still prefer to interact with other squirrels. And humans, so even if AI gets super smart, we don't know how super smart it's going to get. There may be constraints to that or not, but we're still going to want to interact with each other, right? Of course, there's some people who don't want to interact with humans. They prefer to interact with robots, but we have people now who are like loners. They don't like to interact with people, but most people prefer to interact with people. It is part of the human experience. So whether it's just on an interpersonal level or a business level, there's this kind of thing going around of when's the first billion-dollar company going to be made by one person? And somebody said, no, it'll never be a one-person company. It'll be two people because nobody wants to spend the whole day working by themselves, right? So I think developing, regardless of how far AI advances and regardless of what are these levels it's ultimately going to be able to do, and that will vary by area, regardless of what it can do, people are still going to want that interpersonal connection, and people with strong interpersonal skills are still going to thrive. And look, that's going to be true for a long time. Maybe 50 years from now, the whole world's going to be different, but for a long time, these interpersonal skills, but it's not a priority. It's like when kids go to school, people say that person, they really have strong interpersonal skills, or that person, they have leadership. But there's not a lot done to develop those interpersonal skills, to develop that leadership. There's a lot of done to make sure Johnny writes down the notes like off the board into his notebook about these particular dates and can spit them back on a test. And basically making him a stochastic parrot. And that's actually Emily Bender, who you were talking about earlier. That's what she's famous for, this idea that
She's famous.
These AI models are basically based on predictive text and they just parrot back, right? Now I could go, okay, we could say now they can do a lot more than that, or even if they can just do that, like what they're doing, or maybe humans do that. But my point is, and I had said this before, that's a lot of what education is doing. They're just testing how good of a stochastic parrot you are. At least with AI, okay, maybe, there's obviously a good amount of stochastic parroting in the generative model, but they're trying. And there's a separate debate about this with the Apple reasoning paper. People had either developed or are trying to develop reasoning in models. They are making efforts towards planning. That's like a little bit of what an agent does. And we even saw it's called JEPA 2 that Jan LeCun is working on in Meta come out this week, which is another kind of approach, like basically a non-generative approach. And people are they're spending, I heard from on a Peter Diamandis podcast, right now it's basically about $1 billion a day is being invested in developing AI. That's just development. That's not purchases. And where is that money going? To getting AIs to reason, to getting AIs to act with agencies, to getting AIs to plan, to getting AIs to set goals. Are we spending $1 billion a day to help students develop their reasoning capabilities, their planning capabilities, their goal setting capabilities, their interpersonal capabilities? No, we're not. We're spending whatever it is you spend on education a day. Almost all of that is going into this basic stochastic parroting model. And with kind of the financial things that are going on in the world, government cutbacks and supports, it's like schools are actually eliminating some of those, what we call those extracurricular deep learning activity, and they're doubling on the stochastic parroting side of their curriculum, which is, as if I said, at a minimum, what the AIs are really good at. So I think just developing these skills, giving students the opportunity, and their skills, right? So it's practice. I always say like debate. It's kind of like a student be like, I learned how to debate. I took your class and learned how to debate. I'm like, you got to keep doing it because it's a skill you build. You don't just learn math and do one math problem. You do a set. You don't just learn a soccer play, right? You practice it many times. And these interpersonal skills, and they're a little awkward to evaluate. I'd rather tell a kid like you got a 50 on this test where you didn't learn your history than I'm giving you a 5 out of 10 on your interpersonal interaction, right? So it's more awkward, but these are the skills that are really, you already have a big impact. I don't think people realize, how district leaders who are good, right? They have like strong interpersonal skills, right? People are successful for the most part. They have strong interpersonal skills, or they're storytellers, or like all these things, right? So it's probably something we've always underestimated. We talked about that before, but now it's something that it could become a make or break. AI just can do more and more of this information processing, knowledge work every day. And we're going to need fewer and fewer people over time. Every year, we're going to kind of probably need fewer of those people who really excel in that area. So that's, if anything, to me, that's what this study revealed. It needs to shift in that direction. It doesn't matter to me, even if all the tasks that Eric Jolson talks about eventually get automated. I don't necessarily want that to happen. I think that might be unfortunate in some ways. But I'm saying, even if it gets to that level, we'll still want humans to have these skills.
Absolutely. And I think that's why people say having that mindset, having that idea generation, it's hard to imagine now, but there are going to be so many more things that we're going to be able to do. The question just is, are you going to have the skill set to be ready to adapt and go with it? All right. So the other one, and this should really provoke, hopefully, a bit of urgency around really that agency and decision making in young people, because even if as an organization, you don't want to bring it into young people, right? Because, oh no, we're not going to do that, like that Emily Bender. By the time they get to you, this is a generation who now could very well be growing up with toys and Barbie and getting their AI exposure there. So by the time they're in college, the idea that's not even going to be part of what they do is just really hard to imagine. Okay, so anyway, so the next article we wanted to talk about was how there is a new partnership coming together between Mattel, the toy company, and OpenAI. And what I thought was really interesting about how they framed this, they said like toy sales are at an all-time low. More people are going the digital route and things like that. So basically, there is this partnership to be able to look at what might AI integration look like into everything from Barbie to Uno. And they do expect to release the first batch of toys in time for Christmas, it sounds, at the end of the year. And basically, they are going to be doing it not just for integration into the toy, but Mattel as a company is also going to be getting access to the O3 family of reasoning models. Mattel will get to keep their intellectual property. The article was very clear that there is that protection for data, privacy, intellectual property, and things like that. But the Mattel franchise chief, Josh Silverman, basically said, we are looking at how to reimagine play. And I was just, again, every single time I see updates or every single time I see something, I am just, wow, educators and education has just never been more important because they have the research behind play. We know why those things matter, how they should be integrated and whatnot. And so again, if you're not going to stay alongside step and step with what's happening, it's hard then for you to lend that expertise. And I had no idea. You just said that Emily Bender person was famous. I had never heard of her. But again, if you are somebody who's a respected opinion and voice, shouting at people, name calling people, especially online, is probably one of the most, I don't even know what to say. It's strange. It's really strange. And I think what's actually even more sad is if you are somebody with that kind of opinion and you actually have something good to say, but because the way you said it was not appropriate for whatever space you're in, like that, talking to somebody that way and making fun of somebody's title isn't an appropriate thing to do in person, online or offline. But if that's how you're going to talk to people, somebody like me, I'm not ever going to entertain anything you say. I don't care how correct you are. There's got to be other people that I would be more willing to entertain. And that to me is also the human skills, right? Your ability to form relationships is also going to be your ability to influence ideas and build part of the future. So I always go back to the world. I was just doing a session this morning with Desert Sands leadership team, and we were looking at like how to leverage AI for stronger communication strategies, because not to go into a little tangent here, but if you have not seen the updates that Google is bringing into schools for free with Gemini, with Notebook LM, you are really missing out. It is unbelievable. So we looked at creating shared notebooks across organizations to keep up with AI news. But the fact that now when you generate a podcast, somebody can actually join in the podcast. So we were looking at one for, okay, let's do like a podcast on AI updates and AI literacy. And then we did a demo where the podcast started based on the sources we had put in the notebook. And then the person jumped in and were like, before you even start this podcast, I'm a preschool teacher. So make this relevant to me. And because I don't even see where AI could play a role here. And now it's like podcast hosts are literally talking to her and contextualizing everything. It was absolutely mind-blowing. So again, when you look at a company like Mattel, not only are they integrating AI into the design of the toys, the back end, and all the things they're doing, but also looking at how it can be done on the front end. And I always say I'm a little old-fashioned, I think, in many ways. I really like what you said in the beginning. I think I say that to people as well. Just because we talk about AI doesn't mean we're fans of AI. It's more just, I always say, I just really think everybody should have the knowledge to be able to make decisions in this moment for the life it is that they want to live and for what they want things to look like and what comes next. I played with Barbies a little bit, but my two younger sisters, I mean, we still, even though they're in their early 30s now, have all their Barbies. And all we talk about is how excited we are for my niece and nephew to start playing with these toys, because one of the things that they used to spend hours and hours doing is making up stories about the Barbies and all the things that they were doing and all this kind of stuff. And there's stories that we actually still joke about till this day. We remember those stories, we talk about them, they talk about those memories with them. And I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how it comes through and what it looks like. But again, even if you're somebody like me, where I'm just, my first reaction was, oh my God, that's awful. Why are you trying to corrupt a kid's toy and imagination and all these other things? But I'm sure there's a whole spectrum of people who are like, imagination is just going to exponentially be better now. So it's important to know there's always going to be two sides in everything. There's going to be a spectrum of views and opinions on anything new like this. But at the end of the day, if I just put my head in the sand and I'm like, my sisters grew up doing it this way, and I think that's awful, and that gets you nowhere. You have to engage in healthy, kind dialogue and debate so that together you come to consensus about iteratively what you want to do in this moment.
Because it's just like everywhere, you know what I mean? And in the case of Emily Bender, okay, maybe you're just really bent on this idea that it's just a stochastic pair. At this point, most people don't believe that, but obviously she does, and there are a couple other people that do. But you could accept that even if that's true, it can still have a dialogue. It can still generate a commercial, all these things. Even if it can't reason, it's just fake reasoning. It still has a lot of implications. So there's always a lot of opportunity for kind of people to share and kind of integrate, and that is an important part. And I don't like some of those things too, because then the school that doesn't want to deal with AI, they latch onto that. They're like, oh, there's this person who's an AI researcher, and they don't. And people, I am finding in the space that people like when something comes out, and I say, oh, look at the Tesla kit, these fake kids. All right, so we should never have a driverless car, as if a car never hit driven by a human, never hit kids, right? Like it says people just latch on. It becomes a bifurcated debate where people take sides. And there's actually some argumentation theory that talks about this, that, and you see it in society, left, right, everyone. So it's not unsurprising, but it's unfortunate because it is, at least schooling traditionally has functioned. The goal has been to help give kids the best shot they can in life. And there's this emerging world, and some people are saying, ignore it. It's going to go away. It's not going away. It's being used. It's going to be used in commercials. Okay. Is it perfect at math yet? No. So maybe it'll never be perfect at math. Okay. But it's definitely really good at making commercials. And it's being creative. I saw somebody was stitching these different VO3. They stitched it to something else on TikTok and has 400,000 views. So there's all kind of stuff. Who would have thought of that, right? People are like, oh, AI would just be the mean, right? And it's like, oh, now this is like a whole thing that never existed before. So all these things are happening. And I do think education has a chance to give kids this opportunity. And if it doesn't, then like I say, I think in some instances going a bit backwards. I met someone who had recently graduated from college, and she was a marketing major. And she said that in all her marketing classes, her professors told her not to use AI because she wasn't going to be allowed to use it at work. That's just ridiculous. She's like, I use AI all day. I'm really worried that my boss is going to figure out that can do even more than he thinks it can. And then he's going to start to wonder if he needs to keep me around. The idea that I can't use it as work, he's like, that's absolutely ridiculous. So it's when you go back to those professors, well, did they just not know? Or I don't know, marketing, you just think kind of obvious. You can generate images, or were they lying because they're trying to protect their jobs? I don't assume everybody has bad motives, but it's just a bit extreme. But that's my thought. I think we should try to help the kids.
No, definitely. That's why we do this week after week. All right. So if you are somebody who is interested in learning with us this summer, going into fall, as you think about going back to your year, we do have our AI Power Circle, which we have found to be tremendously successful. Because as things move so quickly, these one-off workshops and things like that have definitely proven to be hard, because so much of this is really about redesigning work. And I think if you were to set a goal for yourself about where you want to take your organization in the second half of 2025, where you want to take your own learning in the second half of 2025, it is really looking at making the transition from just using AI as a tool, having all these different chats open and whatnot, to actually formalizing, hiring, and really building and thinking about that AI team. And that is exactly what we do with you inside the AI Power Circle. Because as we do move to a world with more and more AI agents, and really thinking about that a human agency scale that we talked about from that paper, It's going to be so important to know how to collaborate with AI tools along lines of logic and judgment, how to lead workflows where AI plays an integrated role. And so, not just really being somebody who's using AI, but knowing when and where to integrate it into whatever it is that you are doing with a real focus for your teams on mindset and adaptability and collaboration. And so, I wanted to touch on this because there have been so many updates. Now, the tools, the way they were when they were first introduced at the end of 2022, even going into 2023, are just night and day now compared to what they are now. And one of the things that I'm finding is that my AI habits and what I'm using have drastically changed. I don't have anything to support this, but I have noticed in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 months, the quality of ChatGPT just deteriorate. I was like a really big ChatGPT users from GPTs to like all these other things. And I think in some places where the structure, when it's a really well crafted GPT that's very specific, aligned, has instructions, all those things, I find that still works really well. But for the most part, I actually noticed this when I had my accident because Tesla email you a PDF. It's like a driving report. And I uploaded it into ChatGPT and I'm like having all these questions and it just kept hallucinating the report. It wouldn't read it properly. It made some really obvious mistakes that became very apparent. And so I took it to Gemini. But one of the things that I am finding, especially as we do more and more of these workshops with organizations on Gemini, the ecosystem value add or the ecosystem approach to AI is unbelievable. So even with ChatGPT, you can now connect your Google Drive. They have the MCP that they've set up where it allows you to connect to multiple other
Right.
applications. I am finding that Gemini for work, I'm finding that ChatGPT for personal things is a really good. And I almost wonder if that's an intentional move on their end because Sam Altman has commented a lot on how he was surprised by how much people are using this as a life coach and a thing like that. But I find Gemini from a work perspective, the quality is just on another level. But it's not even the quality, it's the ecosystem of when I talk, for example, we're saying make the transition from AI as a tool to a teammate. Having an ecosystem that you can work within is a really different game compared to this add-on ChatGPT to all these other pieces.
I mean, the one thing I do more is that I've used the leading models. So I'll usually use ChatGPT o3 Pro, and then I'll use the Gemini 2.5 Pro, and I'll use Claude 4. I do a lot of writing, so I'm constantly writing and I ask it for feedback, or I'll ask it to rewrite something. And I was really impressed on some feedback that Claude gave me. And then I was actually really impressed with the rewrite of something like Chat GPT o3 gave me. And I just finished an introduction to a book I was writing with someone. And so he was combining these two things. And I said, oh, I think you combine it this way. And then he sent me back his revisions. And I said, oh, okay, this is where we are. And I was like, this is my feedback now based on this. And I was like, this is ChatGPT o3's because I thought it also gave some really good feedback, how there were a couple disconnected ideas or one thing wasn't fully developed. And so now it's, okay, we have all that. And then we're going to send it to the editor who will give us feedback. But I find a lot of these things like multiple AIs are helpful. Also, one thing I've really noticed, you just sort of see like some people say, they say, oh, look at this image from July 2022. Look at this image from June 2025 to see the change. I was one of the early users of Perplexity. And it hallucinated a ton, and sometimes it didn't make a lot of sense. And now it's just so amazing, the deep research tools and stuff like that, and you can choose your model within it. So I try to use different things, but I don't really know how anybody can use these tools and not just think, wow. I'm like, wow. I'm just like, it rewrote this paragraph, and I shared it with the person I was writing the chapter, and he was like, how you wrote that, that's amazing. I told him, I got ChatGPT basically rewrote this paragraph. It wasn't me, but it was incredibly powerful. And I think we've all had some of these moments. Actually, that felt good. I remember when we were at GSV and I was waiting for you to meet up. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to play around with Replit. And I made a website. So Replit is a no code app where you can just text and make a website. And I'll still remember I was sitting and I was just drinking a coffee or something. And I was like, oh my God. I just made a website from text. And I know a lot of HTML. I used to actually teach web design, and I have a website that I can modify some of the stuff. I'm not a professional website designer. I know it's involved, and it'll at least take me a long time and hours to help students do it. And I was just like, wow, this is incredible. And when I was listening to Diary of the CEO episode they were talking about with Jeff Hinton, and Jeff Hinton asked him, what were your moments when you were just blown away? And he's like, well, I was using Replit. And it just made me this thing. And I was like, oh, okay. I feel okay. Like I've made it here, right? Sort of blown away by the same thing. But I sometimes have those moments, even the feedback on the paper is like, wow, this is like really good. Right. You don't realize it's just the speed. If I asked another person to review the chapter, they may have been like, sure. And maybe they would have seen that, but they probably would have taken, if I were to give that kind of quality feedback that I got at GPT-03 in 30 seconds, it would have taken me like a whole day of thinking about what was written there. So it's not just the capabilities, it's also the speed at which it is done. I find it hard. And a lot of times people, they'll be on LinkedIn, they'll criticize it. You used a model that it's not really for that, and then it didn't work. So like, why are you surprised? But I guess I'm just like, I don't even know. And I was talking to someone else about this, and we're both like, yeah. I was like, I just use it all day. So it's weird. She's, oh yeah, I use it all day too. It's not working. It's something I don't know what to do. I just sit there. Once you get this kind of integrated into your workflow, I don't know how you cannot just realize that this is going to change everything, as some people say, even if it didn't advance at all beyond what it can do now. Because we barely touched the surface of its capabilities for most people in most applications. So again, students, like, we should really guide them, at least in a pod. Look, even if you're somebody who doesn't really know how to use it, you don't really think you can help your students, the best piece of advice you can provide is learn how to use it. Right? And don't inhibit them from using it. But don't send them backwards. Just propel them forwards, right? There's a lot of things that your own kids maybe want to do something you don't know anything about, but you still encourage them, or you get them a tutor. You don't say, no, don't do that because I don't know how to do it. You want to, like, agency, right? You talk a lot about that. You want to empower people. You want to give them agencies. You don't want to restrain them from entering, like, this new world.
Absolutely. So if there's one thing we hope that you take away, it's really just become a theme for us. We've been talking about this for a long time, so it's nice to see the research coming back this up as well. Do not just teach people how to prompt, teach them how to partner with their AI tools. Don't just ask, can AI do this? Ask, how will AI be integrated into what it is we are doing? Who is going to own what part of the process? Who is responsible for different parts of the process? And together we will partner with and build these teams that hopefully allow us to do the things that we enjoy doing more, that high value work, and then hand off this boring stuff to the AI, which is pretty, it looks like, according to the research, what most people want. As always, if you need any support, if you have any questions or topics you would like us to cover, please feel free to reach out. And as always, we will drop all the links to everything in the show notes below. I'm actually going on vacation for the next 2 weeks. I haven't told Stefan yet. We're going to have this conversation now, but I'm actually going on vacation for the next 2 weeks. And I will actually say, as a closing piece, I have never felt a need to detox from anything. I'm not somebody who was like, oh, I need a phone detox, or I need a social media detox, or nothing at all. But I truly feel I need an AI detox. I think one of the things that I really love and appreciate about design thinking is it really allows you to focus in on what matters most. So all these things that people are now talking about with, like, partner, design with people, it's all about mindset. These are all design thinking practices. But I feel like even with such a strong design thinking mindset, and that's also probably the nature of what we do. Like, I always, anytime I'm doing a keynote or anytime I'm doing a workshop or anytime I'm anywhere, I always want to make sure I'm bringing people the latest, most relevant information, because it does change so much. And not only the latest and the most relevant, but to understand the latest and relevant things, you have to understand the signals and the trends and then contextualize those in my keynotes for people, because I know they're going to be doing their planning and their strategy for the next 3 to 6 months. And so that information it's a lot. And so anyways, I have decided to, first I was like, oh, maybe I'll just do it because that's how I normally do it. But I actually would like an AI break. And I also just feel, I also am doing this as an experiment, and I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to stick to it, because the idea that I'm not going to read news while I'm anywhere is just very not me. I love news and I love reading. And so I don't know if I'll be able to do it. But the point is, I also want to feel, what is it like to, like, not know anything about AI and come back 2 weeks later? And what does that feel like? Have things really changed that drastically?
You know, maybe GPT-5 will come out while you're.
So that's what I'm saying, though. But what does it feel like to have that experience? It's a little, I know there's a lot of experiments going on. But anyways, the point is, follow Stefan and his blog for all of the updates and over the next 2 weeks, because you do such a great job of posting everything and then writing about it in your blog. So if you're not following Stefan's blog, definitely follow his blog as well. And we will come back to you the first week of July, right? I'm keynoting ISTE. I'm really excited. And so we're going to be at ISTE. And that's literally when I come back a day before ISTE, head to ISTE, and then we'll be back here. So we will be back with you at the second week of July. Yeah. So everybody enjoy, maybe take some days, maybe take your own AI break of your own, and we'll see how it goes. All right. Bye, everybody. We will see you in a couple of weeks.
See you then.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show. giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.